Hello everyone. Have you ever watched everything you built in your entire life disappear in a single night, and the only person you expected to stand beside you turned his back instead? I stood barefoot across the street, staring at the flames swallowing my home, when my own son looked at me and said, "Not my problem anymore." I thought that was the lowest moment of my life, until the fire investigator arrived and said something that changed everything. I never imagined that the worst day of my life would begin with the smell of smoke. Before we begin, if stories like this move you, inspire you, or make you reflect on life, please support this content by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Truly helps more than you know. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your hometown in the comments below. I read every single one. It was 2:17 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. First I ignored it. I had fallen asleep in my recliner after another long day at the hardware store. Since my wife passed 3 years ago, sleep had become shallow and unpredictable. But then the buzzing didn't stop. Call after call. Finally I grabbed the phone. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Daly. Her voice was shaking. "Your house, you need to come outside. Now." I didn't understand at first. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and my heart dropped into a place I didn't know existed. Orange light was flickering across the street. Not from a sunrise. Not from streetlights. From my house. I don't remember putting on my shoes. I don't remember grabbing my jacket. I only remember the cold pavement under my feet, and the unbearable heat radiating from across the road as I stood there watching 30 years of memories crumble into smoke. That house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was where I carried my newborn son through the front door. Where my wife painted the kitchen yellow because she said it made mornings feel hopeful. Where birthdays, arguments, laughter, and silent dinners had all lived under one roof. And now it was collapsing in on itself. Fire trucks lined the street. Neighbors stood in their pajamas, whispering. Some cried. Some stared. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Then I saw him. My son. He was standing near his car, arms crossed, his face lit by the reflection of flames. He hadn't lived with me for 6 months. We'd argued about money, about responsibility, about his decision to quit college and move in with friends who never stayed in one place for long. I walked toward him, my voice trembling. "Did you see how it started?" He didn't look at me right away. When he finally did, his expression wasn't shock. It was distance. "I don't know," he said flatly. "And honestly, it's not my problem anymore." The words hit harder than the heat from the fire. Not my problem anymore. This was the house he grew up in. The house his mother decorated every Christmas. The house that sheltered him through every storm. And yet he stood there like a stranger watching someone else's tragedy. I felt something break inside me, but I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply turned back toward the fire because at that moment losing the house felt easier than losing my son. As the roof gave way and sparks rose into the dark sky, I whispered to myself, "How did we get here?" I thought that was the end of the nightmare. I was wrong. Because just as the flames began to die down, a man in a dark jacket stepped out of one of the official vehicles. He wasn't rushing like the others. He wasn't shouting orders. He was observing. He glanced at the house, then at me, then at my son. And in that instant I realized something terrifying. The fire might not have been an accident. And whatever this investigator had just noticed was about to tear apart what little family I had left. And whatever this investigator had just noticed was about to tear apart what little family I had left. He walked toward us with calm, measured steps, the kind of steps that don't belong in chaos. Around him firefighters rolled hoses, neighbors whispered, and smoke curled into the night sky like a ghost refusing to leave. But this man moved as if time bent around him. He stopped in front of me first. "Sir, I'm Investigator Hale," he said, flashing a badge briefly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I'm going to need to ask you a few questions." I nodded. My throat felt dry tight. Words seemed too fragile for a night like this. "How long have you lived here?" 30 years, I replied. "Anyone else have access to the house?" The question seemed routine, logical. But before I could answer I felt it, that subtle shift in the air. Hale's eyes flickered past me. To my son. He wasn't looking at the burning remains anymore. He was looking at my son's car. "Is that your vehicle?" Hale asked him. My son hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Yeah. Mind if I take a quick look? My son shrugged too casually. It's just a car. Hale gave a thin smile. I've learned there's no such thing as just anything. I watched as they walked toward the car. My heart began pounding. Not because I suspected something specific, but because I suddenly realized how little I knew about my own son anymore. 6 months ago, he had stormed out after I refused to co-sign a loan for what he called a business opportunity. I called it reckless. He called me controlling. You never believe in me, he had shouted. I believe in responsibility, I had answered. That was the last real conversation we had. Now, under flashing red lights, that unfinished argument hung between us like smoke. Investigator Hale circled the car slowly. He didn't touch anything at first. He simply observed. Then he crouched near the trunk. Interesting, he murmured. My chest tightened. What? Called out. He stood and looked at my son. Would you mind opening the trunk? There it was again, that hesitation. It's locked, my son said quickly. Battery's been acting weird. Hale tilted his head slightly. Convenient. The word sliced through the night. Are you accusing me of something? My son snapped, his voice rising for the first time. I'm not accusing anyone, Hale replied evenly. I'm gathering information. Firefighters began packing up. The flames were almost gone now, replaced by thick steam rising from what used to be my living room. My entire life reduced to a blackened frame. And yet, all I could focus on was my son's face. He looked nervous. Not sad. Not angry. Nervous. Hale turned back to me. Sir, do you know if there were any recent electrical issues? Gas leaks? Renovations? No, I said honestly. Nothing. Any insurance changes recently? The question felt like a trap I didn't understand. I updated my policy last month, I admitted. Standard coverage adjustment. My agent suggested it. Hale nodded slowly. Did anyone else know about that? I swallowed. My son might have overheard the call. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. My son stepped forward. Are you serious right now? You think I think, Hale interrupted calmly, that fires don't usually start in 2 separate places at the same time. The world tilted. 2 places. I whispered. Yes, sir. His eyes met mine. This wasn't random. The words didn't explode. They sank. Slowly. Deeply. I looked at my son, searching for something. Outrage, disbelief, comfort. Instead, I saw something else. Fear. Dad, he said quickly. You know I wouldn't do that. Did I? I wanted to say yes without hesitation. I wanted to wrap him in certainty. But in that moment, surrounded by ash and flashing lights, doubt crept in like a cold draft through broken walls. Hale pulled a small evidence bag from his pocket. Inside it was something dark, partially melted. We found this near the side entrance, he said. It looked ordinary, harmless, until I recognized it. It was one of my old workshop rags, the ones I used with cleaning solvents in the garage. The garage my son had been using before he moved out. My breathing became shallow. That doesn't mean anything, my son insisted, but his voice cracked. Those rags were everywhere. Hale nodded. You're right. It doesn't mean anything. Yet. He turned to me again. Sir, I'll need both of you to come down to the station tomorrow morning. Routine procedure. Routine. Nothing about this felt routine. As Hale walked away, my son looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that night. You don't actually believe this, do you? He asked quietly. I opened my mouth and realized I didn't know what to say, because the fire had destroyed my home. But the suspicion that was starting to destroy something far more fragile. And deep down, a terrifying thought began to form. What if the flames weren't the real disaster? What if the truth was? What if the truth was? That question echoed in my mind the entire night, long after the fire trucks disappeared and the neighbors retreated into their safe, untouched homes. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the front seat of my car parked across from the ruins, staring at the skeletal remains of what used to be my life. My son had driven off without another word. Not my problem anymore. The sentence replayed over and over again, now heavier than before. At 8:03 a.m. my phone rang. Investigator Hale. Sir, we've completed a preliminary assessment. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you able to come in now? His tone was steady, controlled, which somehow made it worse. When I arrived at the station, my son was already there. He sat in a plastic chair near the wall, bouncing his knee nervously. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Hale invited us into a small room with a metal table and 3 chairs. No windows, just fluorescent lighting that made everything feel exposed. He placed a thin folder on the table. I'm going to be direct, he said. The fire started in 2 distinct locations, the kitchen and the garage. My stomach twisted. The pattern suggests intentional ignition. The word intentional felt like a verdict. My son leaned forward. You can't prove that. Hale didn't react. We also found traces of an accelerant commonly used in automotive cleaning products. The same type found in, he paused, glancing at the folder, a container located in the trunk of your vehicle. The room went silent. That's normal, my son said quickly. I clean car parts. That doesn't mean anything. Hale folded his hands. You're right. By itself it doesn't. I finally spoke. Then why are we here? Hale looked at me carefully, as if measuring how much I could handle. Because, he said, there's more. He slid a printed sheet across the table toward me. It was a copy of my insurance policy, specifically the recent adjustment. Coverage had been increased significantly. But I told you, I said, confused. My agent recommended that. Property values went up. Hale nodded slowly. Yes. But what's interesting is the timing. What timing? My son snapped. Hale's eyes shifted to him. The policy adjustment was finalized 3 days after someone attempted to access the account online using your login credentials, sir. My heart stopped. I didn't do that, I said immediately. We know, Hale replied calmly. The IP address traces back to a public Wi-Fi network. My son's knee stopped bouncing. The cafe on Brookside Avenue. That was where my son used to meet his friends. That doesn't prove anything, he insisted, but his voice was thinner now. Hale leaned back slightly. You're correct. It doesn't prove everything. But it suggests someone was exploring options. Exploring options. The word sounded almost polite. I turned slowly toward my son. Did you try to access my insurance account? His jaw tightened. I was just looking. Looking for what? He hesitated. For ways to fix things, he muttered. Fix what? His eyes finally met mine, and what I saw there wasn't anger. It was desperation. You were drowning, Dad, he said. You think I didn't see that? Bills stacked up. Store barely breaking even. You wouldn't let me help. Burning the house is helping? I asked, my voice shaking. I didn't burn it, he shouted, then quickly lowered his tone as someone passed outside the room. I didn't. Hale observed us quietly, like a chess player waiting for the right move. There's another detail, he said at last. My pulse pounded in my ears. A neighbor's security camera shows a figure entering the side yard approximately 20 minutes before the first smoke was visible. I felt dizzy. Can you see the face? I whispered. No. The image is partially obscured. My son exhaled sharply. So you don't know who it was? Hale nodded. Not yet. Not yet. Those 2 words carried a storm inside them. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly aware of how fragile everything had become. A house can be rebuilt. Furniture replaced. Photos reprinted. But trust? Once it cracks, it doesn't return to its original shape. Why would you think I'd do this? My son asked me quietly, almost pleading now. And that question hurt more than any accusation, because I didn't want to think it. But the evidence, the timing, the access attempt, they formed a shadow I couldn't ignore. I don't know what to think, I admitted. His expression shifted. That uncertainty wounded him more than if I had accused him outright. Hale closed the folder. We're not making any arrests today, he said. But this investigation is far from over. As we stood to leave, he added one final sentence. And sometimes the person who appears most responsible isn't the one who lit the match. The words followed me out of the station. If my son didn't start the fire, then who did? And why did it feel like someone wanted us to turn against each other? For the first time, I realized something even more unsettling than suspicion. What if this wasn't about money? What if the fire was meant to destroy something else entirely? And what if it was working? And what if it was working? That thought clung to me like smoke in fabric, impossible to shake, impossible to ignore. If someone wanted to tear my son and me apart, they were succeeding. Every glance between us now carried doubt. Every silence felt loaded. The fire hadn't just reduced my house to ash. It had ignited something far more dangerous: suspicion. We walked out of the station together, but not side by side. There was space between us. Physical. Emotional. "Dad," he said as we reached the parking lot, "you don't seriously think I'd destroy our home?" Our home. He hadn't called it that in months. "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted, my voice heavier than I intended. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You never trust me." "That's not fair." "No? Because every time something goes wrong, you look at me like I'm the problem." His words struck deeper than I expected. Was that true? Had I been so focused on discipline and responsibility that I stopped seeing him? Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Investigator Hale. I answered immediately. "Sir, I need you to come back. We've reviewed additional footage." My heart dropped. "Of what?" "Not your property," he said carefully. "The hardware store." The hardware store. My store. 32 years of early mornings and late nights. The one thing I thought was stable. My son's expression shifted when he saw my face. "What happened?" "I don't know," I said. "But it's about the store." 20 minutes later, we were back inside the station. Hale didn't take us to the interrogation room this time. He led us to a small viewing area with a monitor. The screen flickered to life. It showed the back entrance of my hardware store. Timestamp: 1:42 a.m. The same night as the fire. A figure stood near the door. Hood up. Face obscured. My breathing slowed. "That's not me," my son said immediately. "I didn't say it was," Hale replied. The figure crouched near the door for several seconds, then walked out of frame. "What are they doing?" I asked. Hale paused the video and zoomed in. "They appear to be placing something." My chest tightened. "Two separate fire origins at your home," Hale continued, "and an attempted ignition at your business." The room spun. "Attempted?" I whispered. Hale nodded. "The device malfunctioned. Minor scorching but no major damage. If it had worked, your store would have gone up the same night as your house." I stared at the screen, trying to process it. Someone hadn't just targeted my home. They targeted my livelihood. My entire life. "This isn't about insurance," my son said quietly. For the first time since the fire, his voice carried certainty instead of defense. Hale turned to me. "Sir, have you had any disputes recently? Financial conflicts? Anyone angry with you?" My mind raced. Suppliers? No. Employees? I only had 3, and they'd been with me for years. Customers? Then it hit me. 3 months ago, I had declined a buyout offer. A development company wanted my store and several neighboring properties. They planned to build luxury apartments. I refused. That store wasn't just business, it was legacy. The representative had smiled too easily when I said no. "You'll regret holding on to the past," he had told me. A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Hale. There was a developer. Hale's expression sharpened. "Name." I told him. He wrote it down slowly. My son turned toward me. "You never told me that." I didn't think it mattered. He exhaled sharply. "Dad, someone tried to burn both your house and your store on the same night. That's not random." No, it wasn't. It was coordinated, calculated, strategic. And suddenly my son wasn't the suspect anymore. He was standing beside me. Hale folded his arms. "If someone wanted to pressure you into selling, removing your emotional and financial stability would be effective." The words landed heavily. "Destroy the house. Threaten the store. Create chaos. Make me vulnerable." I felt anger rise, not explosive but steady. Controlled. For the first time since the fire, my fear shifted into something else. Clarity. "They wanted me desperate," I said slowly. Hale nodded once. My son looked at me, something softer in his eyes now. "And they almost got what they wanted." I met his gaze. For the first time in days, the space between us felt smaller. But just as relief began to creep in, Hale added quietly, "There's one more thing." Of course there was. "The figure in the store footage," he said, "used a key to access the back gate." I froze. "There are only 3 keys to that gate," I whispered. "Mine. The manager's. And..." I looked at my son. He shook his head instantly. "I lost mine months ago." Lost. Or stolen. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. "If someone had access to that key," he said carefully, "this becomes much more personal than corporate pressure." The room felt colder. Because now this wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about money. It was about access. About someone close enough to know my routines, my policies, my keys. Someone who understood exactly how to make it look like an accident. And as that realization settled in, one terrifying question surfaced in my mind. If it wasn't my son, then who else had been standing inside my life, close enough to light the match? If it wasn't my son, then who else had been standing inside my life, close enough to light the match? That question followed me home, or what used to be home. I stood behind the yellow tape the next morning, staring at the wreckage in daylight. Without the flames, without the flashing lights, the destruction looked even more personal. The kitchen was a hollow shell. The garage roof had collapsed entirely. The garage, where I kept spare tools, old paint cans, cleaning solvents, and a small metal key cabinet mounted beside the workbench. My pulse quickened. I turned to Investigator Hale, who had arrived to walk the property again. "The spare key." He looked at me. "What about it?" "I kept an extra gate key in the garage, locked in a cabinet." We both looked toward the blackened structure. "If someone had been inside before," I continued slowly, "they could have taken it." Hale's expression shifted. "When was the last time you checked?" "I don't remember," I admitted. "Weeks. Maybe longer." My son stood a few steps away, silent. He hadn't left my side since yesterday. Something had changed in him after seeing the footage. The defensiveness was gone. In its place was determination. "I want to see that cabinet," he said. We carefully stepped through the debris with permission from the fire team. The metal cabinet was warped from heat but still partially intact. Hale used gloves to pry it open. Empty. No spare key. My stomach dropped. "I didn't move it," I whispered. My son looked at me. "Who else knew about it?" "Just family," I said automatically. Then I hesitated, and memory hit me like a delayed shock. 2 months ago I had hired someone new at the store. Evan. Mid-20s. Quiet. Polite. Too polite, maybe. He had offered to help me reorganize the garage after closing one evening. Said he wanted to learn more about inventory systems. I remembered him standing right there, near the cabinet. "Dad," my son asked carefully, "you just thought of something." I nodded slowly. "One of my employees helped me in the garage. He could have seen where I kept it." Hale's eyes sharpened. "Full name." I gave it. "And you trust him?" I hesitated again. "I thought I did." Hale made a call immediately. Within an hour, we were at the hardware store. Police had already cordoned off the minor scorch mark near the back door from the failed ignition attempt. Evan was inside. He looked surprised when he saw us. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing a small smile. Hale stepped forward. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." Evan's posture stiffened just slightly. "About the fire?" he asked. "Interesting." Hale hadn't mentioned which fire. "How did you know we were referring to the house?" Hale asked calmly. Evan blinked. "Well, that's what everyone's talking about." My son crossed his arms. "Not everyone knows about the store." Silence. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. Evan's eyes flickered. Hale didn't waste time. "We have footage from the back of this building. Someone used a key to access the gate at 1:42 a.m. Evan swallowed. "That's not me." "Where were you last night?" Hale asked. "At home." "Anyone confirm that?" "No." The confidence he usually carried began to fade. Then Hale delivered the blow. "We also have a partial fingerprint from the spare key cabinet in the garage." That wasn't true. I could tell by the way Hale said it, controlled testing. Evan's face drained of color. You said the cabinet was destroyed, he blurted. The room froze. Hale didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, I never told you that. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my own breathing. Evan looked at me then, not at Hale, not at my son. At me. I didn't mean for it to go that far, he said quietly. The words felt like the ground giving way. What did you do? I whispered. He shook his head, panic rising. They said it would just scare you. Make you reconsider the offer. I didn't think the house would. He stopped himself. But it was too late. My knees felt weak. The developer? Hale pressed. Evan nodded slowly. They offered me money. Said the old man wouldn't budge. Said if things got unstable, he'd sell. Old man. That was how they saw me. Not a father. Not a husband who had built something from nothing. Just an obstacle. I never meant to hurt anyone. Evan continued desperately. I just needed the money. My son stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. So you let my dad think I did it? Evan looked down. I didn't know you'd be there that night. That sentence hit harder than anything else. He hadn't planned for my son to be present. Which meant, you were watching the house, I said slowly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Hale placed him under arrest calmly. No shouting. No chaos. Just quiet consequences. As they led him away, I stood there in stunned silence. My son turned to me. You almost believed it was me, he said softly. The guilt hit immediately. I was scared, I admitted. And fear makes you see shadows where there aren't any. He nodded, but I could see the hurt linger. The fire had burned wood and walls. But it had also exposed cracks that had been forming long before the flames. And as I looked at my son standing beside me, not against me, I realized something even more powerful than revenge or justice. We had almost lost each other. Not to fire, but to doubt. And that realization scared me more than anything that had happened so far. Not the flames. Not the collapsing roof. Not even the thought of losing everything I had built. What terrified me most was how close I had come to losing my son, not because of what he did, but because of what I believed. We stood in the empty parking lot of my hardware store after Evan was taken away. The air felt strangely still, as if the world had paused to let everything sink in. My son broke the silence first. You really thought I could do that? He said quietly. It wasn't anger in his voice. It was disappointment, and somehow that was worse. I didn't want to, I answered honestly. But the evidence, the timing, the insurance. He looked away. You've always thought I was reckless. That's not true. Isn't it? He shot back, but without raising his voice. You didn't trust my ideas. You didn't trust my decisions. So when something went wrong, it made sense to you that I'd be the reason. His words landed slowly, heavily. He wasn't wrong. After his mother passed, I had clung to control, structure, stability. I told myself I was protecting him, but maybe I was just protecting myself from more loss. I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid you'd fail. Afraid you'd get hurt. Afraid I'd lose you too. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift. You almost did, he said. That sentence pierced deeper than any accusation. We stood there in the shadow of the store sign that still read family-owned since 1994. The word family felt heavier now. More complicated. Evan said they wanted to pressure me. I continued. They wanted me desperate enough to sell. My son nodded. And they almost succeeded. He wasn't talking about the business. He was talking about us. The next few days were a blur of statements, paperwork, insurance calls, and media curiosity. Word spread quickly about the attempted property sabotage. The developer denied involvement publicly, of course. Claimed they had no knowledge of Evan's actions. But Hale assured me the investigation would go deeper. You weren't the only property owner who refused, he told me privately. We're looking into similar patterns. It was bigger than I thought. But strangely, that didn't consume me the way it should have. Because every night after that, my son showed up. Not out of obligation. Not because he had nowhere else to go. But because he chose to. He helped me sift through what little was salvageable from the house. He stood beside me while contractors assessed the damage. He even sat with me at the insurance office when I signed preliminary rebuild papers. One evening, as we stood looking at the empty foundation, he said something that stopped me. You know, when I said, "Not my problem anymore," I didn't mean the house. I turned to him. I meant the pressure. The constant feeling that I had to prove something. His voice cracked slightly. I was tired of feeling like I was always disappointing you. The confession hung between us. I never saw you as a disappointment, I said immediately. But you saw me as a risk, he replied. And again he wasn't wrong. We had both been standing on opposite sides of pride, waiting for the other to cross first. It took a fire to force us into the same space. A week later, Investigator Hale visited the temporary apartment I was staying in. He brought updates, financial trails connecting Evan to a shell consulting firm tied loosely to the development group. Nothing explosive yet, but enough to suggest coordination. They underestimated something, Hale said before leaving. What's that? I asked. You. I almost laughed. I lost my house. But you didn't lose your ground, he replied calmly. And more importantly, you didn't lose your son. After he left, I sat quietly thinking about that. The house could be rebuilt. The store would recover. But the real reconstruction was happening in smaller, quieter ways. Conversations. Honesty. Shared silence that no longer felt hostile. One night, my son handed me something small. It was the old spare key. Bent. Slightly melted at the edges. They found it in Evan's car, he said. Hale thought you might want it. I held it in my palm. Such a small object. Yet it had unlocked chaos. I closed my fingers around it and exhaled slowly. They tried to burn down our foundation, my son said softly. I looked at him. But they forgot something, he added. What's that? Foundations aren't just made of wood and concrete. In that moment, I understood something powerful. The fire had exposed more than criminal intent. It had exposed our weaknesses, our assumptions, our silence. And now, standing on the ruins of what used to be my home, I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe the fire didn't just destroy. Maybe it revealed. But what it revealed would change the course of our family forever. I didn't fully understand that sentence when it first formed in my mind. I thought the change would be practical, rebuilding the house, reopening fully, watching the investigation unfold. I was wrong. The real change happened the morning the developer himself walked into my temporary office. He wore the same polished smile I remembered from months ago. Expensive suit. Calm posture. The kind of man who believed everything had a price. I'm very sorry for what happened to your property, he said smoothly, taking a seat without being invited. Terrible situation. I didn't offer him coffee. I heard one of your employees was involved, he continued. Young people make foolish decisions. There it was. Distance. Denial. Disassociation. You offered him money, I said quietly. He gave a light chuckle. Allegations can be creative when emotions run high. Before I could respond, the office door opened. Investigator Hale stepped in. The developer's smile faltered for half a second. Perfect timing, Hale said calmly. We were just discussing creative allegations. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Hale placed a folder on the desk, thicker than the last one I had seen. Financial transfers, Hale continued. Consulting agreements. Messages retrieved from a company device linking Evan to one of your project coordinators. The developer's jaw tightened. You're reaching, he said. Am I? Hale replied. Because conspiracy to commit arson, even without physical presence, is not something courts consider minor. The room felt electric. For weeks I had felt powerless, displaced, reduced to paperwork and waiting. But now I saw something different. The developer looked at me, not as an obstacle this time but as a risk. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Legal battles are exhausting, expensive. You've already lost your home. I stood up slowly. Yes, I said. I did. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes without hesitation. But I didn't lose my backbone. Silence filled the room. And I didn't lose my son. Those words meant more than any property deed. The developer's confidence cracked just slightly before Hale escorted him out for formal questioning. When the door closed, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge. Not victory. Closure. Later that evening, my son and I stood at the empty lot again. The debris had been cleared. Only the foundation remained. I was angry that night, he admitted quietly, when I said it wasn't my problem anymore. I know, I replied. I thought walking away would make me independent, he continued. But watching that house burn, I realized something. What's that? No matter how far I try to run, this is still my foundation too. The word foundation echoed again. This time it felt solid. Weeks passed. Charges were filed. The developer's project stalled under investigation. Other property owners came forward with similar intimidation stories. Justice didn't happen overnight, but it started. Construction crews eventually broke ground on rebuilding my house. My son was there the first day, holding the blueprint beside me. "You sure you want the kitchen yellow again?" he asked with a small smile. I looked at the paper. "Yes," I said. "Some things are worth keeping." He nodded. And for the first time in years, we weren't arguing about the future. We were planning it together. One evening, as the frame of the new house began to rise, my son turned to me and said something I will never forget. "You know, when I said, 'Not my problem anymore,' I was wrong." I looked at him. "It was always my problem," he continued, "because you're my father." Emotion tightened my chest, but this time it wasn't grief. It was gratitude. The fire had taken walls, furniture, photographs, but it had burned away something else too: misunderstanding, pride, silence. And in its place it left something stronger: trust. Sometimes disaster doesn't arrive to destroy you. Sometimes it arrives to expose what's fragile. I lost my house that night, but I almost lost something far more valuable: my relationship with my son. Fear made me doubt him. Pride made him distance himself. And outside forces tried to turn our cracks into collapse. But here's the truth. A house can be rebuilt. A business can recover. But family, real family, is the foundation that holds everything else up. If you let fear decide for you, you might burn bridges that were never meant to fall. So talk. Listen. Choose trust before suspicion. Because sometimes the real fire isn't the one you see. It's the one that starts quietly between the people who matter most. And if you're not careful, it can do far more damage than flames ever could.